Okay, we're going to hear from our first sponsor. He actually sold his very first ad at 17 years of age and fell in love with the advertising business. He still loves the business today and is still selling 49 years later. Please welcome the founder and president of Campbell & Company Marketing Communications, Mr. Ross Campbell.
Thank you, Susan. Oh, well, Jerry did ask me to give you one tip because my book is called On Advertising That Works, and it covers the 7 key principles that make advertising work every time. And Jerry said, Ross, you don't have time for 7. I'm going to give me your best shot. What is, in your opinion, the most important tip that you can give these people coming out to my seminar? I said, well, Jerry, I got to cover off the fact that without this principle, nothing else makes any sense. And that is, we have to know our customers. That is imperative. I've had a lot of fun in my career. I've worked with some fabulous people. I worked with a gentleman that I know you've all heard of, Mr. Ed Mirvish. I think Ed Mirvish was not just a brilliant business person, but he was also an advertising genius. You may not think so if you see his ads, but let me tell you something. This guy knew his customer. He knew his market. And he built this icon. Honest Ads is known all over the world. It fits up right up there with Harrods in England. Honest Ads is the ultimate store for low prices. Phenomenal. I met Ed in 1974 when I was selling advertising for CFRB in Toronto. And in 1974, CFRB was a giant. It was monstrous. It had over 1 million listeners. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, when Jack Dennett did the news, 500,000 people tuned in to listen to the newscast. You can't find that kind of audience today. And I called on Ed Mirvish. I said, Ed, you should be on my radio station. Ed said, Ross, I shouldn't be. I said, come on. He said, no. He said, you don't communicate with my market. You simply don't talk to them. My market, I know my market. I know my customer. My customer is an immigrant. It's a low-income person. I know what their needs are. And so I cater to those needs. Nobody knew it better. How do you think this kind of thing worked? That was an ad. That is a crappy-looking ad. I mean, you take the guys in my business and say, that's awful. Oh, yeah? It may not look good, but it caters to his customer. And guess what happened when he ran that ad? That's right. People lined up. Those of you who've spent any time in Toronto and you've seen the crowds that lined up, they used to start lining up at 4 o'clock in the morning to take advantage of his door crasher specials. What was the secret? He knew exactly what his customer wanted. I put together a special report that I think everybody should have possession of, and it's called How and Why You Really Must Get to Know Your Customer, using the WHAM method. I wanted WHAM because, boy, WHAM, why didn't I think of that? Yes, we have to know this stuff. And I have extra copies of this, by the way, and if you'll come and see me at the break, I'd be happy to give you a copy. The W in WHAM stands for who are the customers? Who are they? What do they do? Male, female? What percentage are male, female? Men or women? Where do they work? What's their income? What are their interests? The W, that's the beginning of it. Who exactly are these people? What neighborhoods do they come from? Honest Ed knew where his people came from. He ran that ugly-looking ad, and he sent it out in all the neighborhoods, and boy, I'll tell you what, the response was immediate. Who are they? First thing you got to know. The H stands for hot buttons. What turns them on? What will excite them? Because you can't really prepare an advertising program unless you know exactly what your customers are interested in and what's going to get them to come to you. What are the hot buttons? Got to know that. Attitudes. Heard Jerry talking about attitudes. Everybody has an attitude towards certain industries. I know people have an attitude towards financial planners at a point, right? When they melt down the market. They have an attitude. Most people don't like used car salesmen. We have an attitude. And if you have that, it doesn't mean you're out of business, but what it means is you have to adjust the way you communicate and what you say to these people. Media preference. Okay, here's where it is. And this is why Ed didn't waste a dime in advertising and didn't spend any money with me. And I thought I was a red-hot salesman at CFRB, but didn't spend a dime because his people would not spend any time with CFRB. They were interested in reading the local papers that might have been ethnic papers. They would certainly be able to read an English newspaper of which they were interested. So he ran every week in the Toronto Star, the Toronto Telegram in the old days. And he knew that's what they wanted to. But these things you got to ask your customers. You got to find out what is it that they pay attention to. How much time do they spend on the internet, say on Facebook or LinkedIn or any of the other social network sites? How much time do they spend with that? How much time do they spend listening to the radio? People who are gathered on the 401, I saw them this morning coming in from Burlington, and you had to guess these guys are listening to the radio. That's got to be a very important market for some of them. You know your customers, you know where you're going to reach them. Radio stations, television, perhaps just online web surfing. It's imperative to know this because once you know, then you don't waste your money on stuff they don't care about. And every customer base has a common denominator, no matter who they are. Jerry touched on the complexity of media today and the fact that the internet has taken over like nothing ever did in the past, and that's absolutely true. And when I talk about advertising principles, I'm talking about advertising principles that existed 100 years ago, or 55 or 60 years ago, when Honest Ed first opened that Honest Ed store. Ed Mervis did that, same principles. You still have to have integrity, you still have to give a product that people really care about, and you have to resonate with a message that makes sense for these people, because people do not read ads, they read what they're interested in. They only listen to messages that they're interested in. That's the wham. And that's the simplicity of this whole program. And when you do your advertising, Jerry, this is the one thing you got to know. Because once you know who your customer is, what they're interested in, what their attitudes are, and what media they pay attention to, now you know what to do. Everything falls into place. Because the truth is that it's not all about us. Today, sitting up here, standing before you, it's not about me. It's all about you and what you can take away from this meeting today and my little moment here on stage. Same thing with your customers. It's not about you. And so many messages are created saying, look at me, look at me. They don't work. You got to be telling them, here's what's in it for you. And you got to know what they care about before you can craft that wonderful message. Wham. That's what Honest Ed did. He knew his market. He knew exactly what they would respond to. He knew they were looking for bargains. That's why his concept was from wine to twine. Everything at Honest Ed's. Amazing. If you do one thing today, if you take one idea away from this moment that I have with you, please take away the booklet on getting to know your customer with the wham method. It works. Thank you very much.
Wasn't that awesome? Let's give it up again for Ross. I tell you, he is Jerry's man. I had the chance to spend some time with Ross outside the room. And 49 years in the business, and he is right up to the money on what is happening in 2010 and what is happening coming up in 2011. So make sure you go out there, grab Ross's brochure on how to get to know your customers.